Hey guys, this is Miss Adams. You are now watching the video for 7F19B, which is sensory language. So first what we're going to do is we're going to read this paragraph and just identify the important things that we need to know before we go into the multiple choice. And then we'll engage with the multiple choice practice. Okay, so first thing I want us to note is that this part, this F19B, this means that we are making inferences. All right, so not only are we looking at sensory language, but we're making inferences from that sensory language. Okay. All right. The STAR test will ask you about the meanings of sensory language. So that's one thing they're going to ask you about. The meaning of sensory language that the authors use in selections. Sensory language appeals to the senses, sight, sound, and touch. All right? The test will ask you to interpret why the author uses certain kinds of imagery or figurative language. All right, so this part, this interpret why, that is that inference, okay? So really it's the author's purpose in using this figurative language, all right? What was the author's purpose? Why did they do it? And its effects. Okay, these kinds of questions test your ability to analyze sensory language, so to break it down, all right? Imagery and figures of speech, that's figurative language, and interpret meanings within the paragraphs. So really, it's asking you to do a couple things. First thing it's asking you to do is identify figurative language, all right? Then, after you've identified it, you need to know what it means. Once you know what it means, you need to make an inference about the figurative language. And that comes in those associations when you're reading. All right? And that can tell you what the impact is on the text. Okay? And then the last thing potentially that they would ask you to do is the author's purpose in using it. All right? So those are the 4 ways, or the 4 steps that you're really going to have to take in order to get to some of these questions, okay? All right. So sensory language will appear in several ways on the STAR. The first way it could appear, all right? I'm going to highlight this in pink so you don't get too confused here. Okay, so way number 1 that it's tested is that they ask you to identify the figurative language. So which paragraph provides the imagery that describes the father? So that's really this thing, okay? Then, over here, it's going to question you about the reason the author chose to use a certain type of figurative language, all right? So that is that guy down there. The author's purpose. Why did the author choose to use figurative language? Okay? And then the third way they will test you is asking you to explain the effect or the meaning, and that's going to be this impact on the text, okay? So, identify figurative language, explain author's reasons, and then explain effect or meaning. Okay. So, now let's give it a try. Alright, so it says read questions 1 and 2 first. So when you read the questions first, what that does is it gives you a lens. It tells you what you are looking for. When you annotate. Alright, so I'm going to look at the questions. So question 1 says, what does Abraham Lincoln mean by the words, with malice toward none, with charity for all? Alright, so knowing that this is probably figurative language, this one is asking me what he means. So it's our second way of, the third way of testing us, okay? So I'm going to go into the text, I'm going to highlight that quote. Let's see, it's actually the very beginning. Okay? And then I look at the second question. It says, which line from the selection personifies, all right, so that's a specific type of figurative language, the country as a whole. I know that personification is giving human qualities to non-living things, okay? So I need to find where he personifies. So I'd go back to this paragraph and I'd write personification, okay? Because I'm looking for this. All right, then when I'm done looking at the questions, I'm going to go back into the text and I'm going to read the questions, or read the text, okay? So it says, with malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves with all nations, to bind up the nation's wounds. So it asks about the country, personification for the country. Well, this looks like personification of the country or the nation. The nation can't physically have wounds. That's a human thing, all right? But we are personifying nation, okay? So then I'm going to make an inference here. If it's asking me about the meaning or the effect, I would make an inference about like what wounds would mean, okay? All right, so I'm going to come back down and I'm going to answer my questions. What does Abraham Lincoln mean by the words, with malice toward none, with charity for all? Well, first of all, I'm going to have to figure out what malice means. All right, and if I look malice up in the dictionary, it means like bad intentions. Like you do something to hurt someone. All right? So with malice toward none, so no bad intentions, and charity, which is giving for all. Okay. So does that mean to treat people with goodwill or to act with revenge instead of forgiveness? Well, if I'm acting with revenge, that means I have bad intentions because I want to hurt someone for what they did to me. So I wouldn't act with revenge. So it would be A. All right. If I look at 2, it says, which line from the selection personifies the country as a whole? Well, I found it right here, so I just have to match it up with the bottom, and it is F. All right. So if I look at the bottom here, it's asking me which question is about the effect of the author's language, and then it says which question is the meaning of the images created. Well, this first one is asking about what's it mean, all right? And then the question asks about the effect here. All right, guys, you are done. So make sure that you go and fill out your reflection after doing this practice, and then you can go ahead and move on to your next video. Good luck.